Infinite Creator. I know I'm thankful. I think all here are to just be able to gather together with people of like hearts and minds, for encouragement, for sharing, for opening us up to greater love and truth and beauty. And thankful for everyone here, thankful to know them, thankful for Tim and his presentation tonight. And we just ask you to help us receive fully that which is for our greatest good and good of our service to others. Aho.
Okay. Well, Tim, jump right on in, man. You've got the floor.
Oh boy. Well, first of all, I have to thank Russell for your presentation last week on Unitarianism. I listened to it today and it was fantastic. I learned so much that I never knew. And I'm glad that these are recorded so that those who aren't with us can hear it later. I was on spring break with my family. Um, Being a father is a lot like being a mediator between warring miners. And so we went on a hike up the canyon. And the first time we went on the hike, everyone was out of sorts and there was fighting, so it ended short. And so the next day I said, no, we're not going to accept failure. We're going to go back up that canyon. We're going to have a do-over. So the next day we had our donuts and we went up the canyon and we went on the hike and everyone got along. So it just goes to show, no matter how bellicose things appear, tomorrow is a new day. And I always have to share a lawyer joke when we're together. And so this one is a lawyer died, and he went up to the pearly gates, and St. Peter greeted him with a massive celebration. There was confetti and angel trumpets, and it's like all of heaven was throwing a party. And he thought he'd won the lottery or something. He said, "What's going on?" And St. Peter said to him, "You are the oldest living man to have ever come here." He said, "What are you talking about? I'm 44 years old." And St. Peter looked at his notes and said, "Oh, we must have added up all of your billable hours." So anyway, oh, I come to you tonight, so grateful for all of you, for this group. There is a richness and diversity of what we've talked about. Since I've been attending, we've talked about time. I think it was DeMarcus that talked about past, present, future. We had Rudy talk about AI. We've done the magic personality. Danny talked about Mary a little bit. We've just done so many interesting things. And so I thought it won't be far-fetched tonight if we just spend a little bit of time in Egypt. Have any of you traveled there and seen the pyramids? James, what was it like? Is it as magical as it seems to us who've never been?
It is. It's very the Middle Eastern culture is so different. It's jarring with all of the they see white Western Americans, and so like it is hard to take in some of the scenes because it's like we were prey for salesmen, and so that had an unfortunate effect. But there are the pyramids that are more not the ones of Giza, and I don't know how to tell you where the ones were, but those kind of were more magical because they were in the middle of nowhere and you could kind of have them to yourself. But yes, magical is the word.
Ever since reading about mummies, I've just been fascinated by Egypt. Don asked Ra about mummification, and Ra gave kind of what I thought was a little bit of a coy answer, which said we're not going to really talk about that. But those that were mummified often offered themselves up in service to others. Danny, did you also raise your hand? Have you been there? Did you get spit on by camels?
rode one. Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. One of my best friends from college lives in Cairo, and I actually did on up the Nile River into the areas that James was talking about, up to the where a lot of the burial sites are, and yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, what struck me near the pyramids, there's an area where these huge granite, monolithic, I wouldn't even call them stones, but they're perfectly rectangular. I don't know how many tons they must weigh. And if you look down them, having been a contractor, all of their perfectly symmetrical flat surfaces are all in line with each other all the way down. There's no way you could even, even create such perfect geometric figures and have them in a line like that. They're kind of down by the Sphinx, but I think that was one of the most impressive things, and polished and shiny. And it's those kinds of things where you go, wow, this something happened here far beyond human labor at that time.
There is something very special that I can feel, having never even been there. I've traveled to where Moses, ostensibly by tradition, received the Ten Commandments on Sinai, but I never made it to Giza. I never went to Luxor. I've never seen the pyramids. But I lived for a year in Jerusalem growing up. And can you see the PowerPoint? Did it come up? All right. When there are some people that like to talk about how our bodies have chakras, which I don't think is too far-fetched for those of us who have read the raw material. And then there are those who I really appreciate who take it to the next level, who talk about the earth as a living organism having chakras as well. And with geomancy, they try to find where those chakras might be. I know that I think I'd have to dig out some of the material I used to read. It's been a couple of years. But I think there are some really compelling arguments that I have seen where those chakras have celestial alignments. And certainly the pyramids line up with that. So does the Holy Land. For those of you who may have been interested in this, the only chakra, and again, this is with humility that we talk about these things because we don't really know, but I think there's a good case one could make. The only chakra that seems to be in the running in North America is in Mount Shasta, California. So it's on my bucket list. I want to make it out there to Mount Shasta. I'll pull out that article. If any of you are interested, you can email me, and I can share with you the scientists and those that were working on this back in the 90s, and spent many years trying to find historical synchronicities with also the movement of the earth, and so anyway, this earth is a really special place, and I really credit the law of one, the raw material, for opening my eyes to just how remarkable the earth is and how our destinies are entwined. And tonight, I'd like to walk us there, beginning with I don't speak Greek, but this is a Greek. As I understand it, back when Caesar was in power, there was a Greek historian who wrote the history of the world, and his name was, let me look for it here. This Greek historian, I was a history major in college, so I really love history. Diodorus Siculus. And so we know about this inscription. This was in the tomb complex of Ramses II in the Ramesseum, and it was located in the world's oldest known library. This predates the Library of Alexandria. And he wrote in Greek, and so that's what I've put there at the top. And what it translates to is the house of healing for the soul. And I just think that's so fitting because when Ra describes their purpose, they said, I'm going to read a little bit more than what I've fit onto the slide. But 11,000 years ago, we attempted to aid them in technical ways having to do with the healing of mind-body-spirit complex distortions through the use of the crystal. Thus were the pyramids created. Now, I want to highlight the fact that they are not healing our mind-body-spirit complexes. This is a nuance and a distinction that only became meaningful to me when I looked at this like a lawyer looks at language. We normally think when our body is sick, well, I'm sick. Or when, we're having a bad mental health day, I'm one of this. But they're if you look technically at what they're saying they're trying to heal, they're not healing our mind, spirit, body, spirits, which I think in a way are complete and whole and wonderful. And I like to view them as just being one with the Creator, because we are one. What they're trying to heal is the distortions. And I think that's an important distinction. So when we're sick in the body, don't think, oh, I've got to heal my X or Y is off. It's like, oh, I want to lean into where are these distortions? And so it's not a way that something is wrong with us or that we are broken or sick or ill, but that there are distortions that we can resolve. If that was a meaningful distinction to me, and maybe I'm being too technical with the language, but I liked that. And they said we left your peoples. However, we have never left your vibration due to our responsibility for the changes in consciousness we had first caused and then found distorted. So what I find fascinating is that this discussion that was introduced with healing is now conjoined with changes in consciousness. So they came to heal and they remained to continue healing us for these distortions in our consciousness that they are trying to make right. So they say in the 18th dynasty, so I don't know much about Egypt. I'm not an Egyptologist. Wasn't my area of specialties, but this would be in the New Kingdom around 1500 BC to 1300 BC. So if Moses lived, I don't know, give or take by couple hundred years around 1200 BC, the 18th dynasty would be before Moses, but not too far before. As it is known in your records of space-time distortions, we were able to contact a pharaoh, as you would call him, and this entity, his name is Akhenaten, and this is the stele of Akhenaten with Queen Nefertiti. And it's so cool, kind of even looks a little like, I don't know, there's a lot going on there. And so Ra says that Akhenaten was a wanderer. They say he became convinced that the vibration of one was the true spiritual vibration and thus decreed the law of one. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. So what was special about this wanderer, Akhenaten? They said the one known as Akhenaten was able to perceive this information. Remember, they came to reveal philosophical teachings for the healing of distortion, was able to perceive this information without significant distortion for a time. He moved, shall we say, heaven and earth. So that's very interesting that we have Ra saying that this Egyptian king, pharaoh, or pharaoh means father, moved heaven and earth to invoke the law of one and to order the priesthood of the pyramids in accordance with the distortions of initiation and true compassionate healing. So that's an interesting qualifier for healing. I guess there is average healing and then there is true compassionate healing. So I want you to think about what compassionate healing may look like as we go through tonight. And so Don asked, in your service, I'm going to put up a quote from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, because you can't talk about Egypt without some good quotes. I am the firstborn, the light of the sky. I breathe in the presence of a powerful God. My breath is like a child to me. I have traveled through the tomb, dark and lonely ground. I am here now. I have come. So Don asked Ra, do you work with any other planets other than the Earth, or just the Earth? This is in 1423. And Ra says, we only work with this planetary sphere at this time, which I think is pretty cool. So when they entered our inner planes, they have remained in our vibration ever since, and they have never left us. And so Don asked, how did you journey from Venus to this planet? Ra, we used thought. Don, how do you perform your normal service? How have you given the law of one over the last 2,300 years? How have you normally given this to Earth people? I am Ra. We have used channels, such as this one, but in most cases the channels feel inspired by dreams and visions without being aware consciously of our identity or existence. Now, I'm trying to thread a needle, because if Ra came with a specific purpose in mind, which was to heal us through the law of one, then the technique was crystals in the pyramids, and more broadly through channels and through dreams and visions, which I think is a really interesting way. We don't often think of dreams and visions and the inspiration that comes through channeled material as being of a healing sort. Dawn, when you contact the entities in their dreams, these entities, I assume, have to be first seeking in the direction of the law of one. Is this correct? I am Ra. This is correct. Now, this is the part I was leading up to. I think this is so interesting. This is 14.26. For example, the entities of the nation of Egypt were in a state of pantheism, as you may call the distortion towards separate worship of various portions of the Creator. We were able to contact one whose orientation was towards the one. So talking about Akhenaten. So this wanderer stood out and was able to become a contact or a channel to teach the law of one, because they were able to reorient their thinking from a pantheistic worldview to a worldview whose orientation was towards the one. Can you tell me, Don asked, why you went to Egypt and your, shall we say, orientation of attitude when you first went to Egypt? I am Ra. At the time of which you speak, there were those who chose to worship the hawk-headed sun god, which you know as vibrational sound complex Horus. Now, you probably have heard of like the Eye of Horus. There's also the Eye of Ra. So the Eye of Horus is the left eye, the moon, and the Eye of Ra is the right eye, or the sun. This vibrational sound complex has taken other vibrational sound complexes, the object of worship being the sun disk, representing in some distortion. And so in a hymn to Ra in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it says, "Let there be prepared for me a seat in the boat of the sun on the day whereon the god saileth." Doesn't this just make you want to jump on Ra's boat? Okay, so let's talk about any thoughts before we transition to talking about who Ra was in terms of Egyptian myth? All right. So, Ra, the sun god. Here, Ra is depicted in the tomb of Queen Nefertari. He's illustrated with a falcon head, or hawk head, as he often is, representing that flight, the sky, the sun. Ra was believed to light the world by day, traveling in his sun barge. But then every night he would dip into the underworld and he would confront and battle the powers of chaos. And he would overcome and he would rise again the next morning, ensuring the sun's rebirth. So he represents creation and power and the promise of eternal lives. In this endless, eternal dance between day and night, life and death, light and darkness. And so what I think is really cool is that Ra has a Trinitarian aspect, which I was not aware of. There is Ra in the morning, and he is represented by the scarab beetle. So whenever you see the scarab beetle, notice the wings here. This is Ra in his morning aspect. And there in the picture, you can see the sun. And so you'll often see him in Egyptian iconography this way. And then when the sun becomes at high noon, you see him in his falcon head when it's at its zenith, and he's known as Ra. The beetle is called Khepri. And then at evening, what I think is so fascinating is that Ra takes the form of Atum, the human form, before he dips below the horizon and enters the underworld. And so all these three make Ra. And so every good hero needs a good villain. As we've learned from Darth Vader, a story is only as compelling as its villain has good character depth. And so in third density, the Egyptians have a really wonderful dark side. It's Apophis, or Apep, which is the great snake. Now, Apophis's plan is not complicated. He simply wants to kill Ra, prevent the sunrise, plunge the world back into chaos and back into darkness. Simple. every evil mastermind, that's always what they want, isn't it? And so because of the serpent's design, the Egyptians associated all kinds of suffering and calamity with Apophis, like earthquakes, storms, darkness, destruction. Your classic bad guy. And so here we have one of the more famous reliefs where you have Atum, Ra, facing off against Apep. Now look how they depicted the snake in these coils of infinity, endless eights, back and forth in the recursive spiral. So the Egyptian religion tells how the gods and goddesses would unite and defeat Apophis and restore order. They were continually at it because it never ended. In this relief, this is one of my most favorite of all of the Egyptian hieroglyph things. So this is the god Mao, this is from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, spell 17, and spoiler alert, Mao, the god cat, is a depiction of Ra. Mao holds the secrets of eternal lives, and here Mao is defending the tree of life from Apophis. Do you see the snake coiling around the tree's trunk? And Mao is holding, it looked kind of like a sharp leaf, but it's a knife. And what's interesting, when we have all of these symbols of a tree of life, of a snake, light and dark, for those of us from a Christian background, think of the Garden of Eden motif. But the Egyptian myths predate those, but they do have a lot of similarities. In this Egyptian account, Mao mortally wounds Apep with his knife, and he cuts him into pieces, kind of like the winged serpent Apep, which is called the dragon in the book of Revelation, where we see kind of the same imagery. Because remember, the dragon had 7 heads. And what's interesting about this is from a parchment piece held in the Louvre's collection, is that in the Egyptian myth, Apep is cut into 7 pieces with 7 deadly knives. Now, in the law of one, is 7 significant? When you think about this, the 7 levels or densities, states of consciousness that we go through. And if you look on the barge, you can identify Ra now because of the scarab head. And then on the bow, leading the boat, is Thoth. But you see, there's a problem with snakes who regrow lost limbs, who regenerate every night. Apep, who is killed, grows during the day, and the battle recommences every night. The darkness is never, ever vanquished and destroyed. It's merely kept in place. You see, the Egyptian gods defeated the serpent, but as Ra sailed in the sky by day and Apophis regenerated and the war resumed, you would think we would grow weary of this constant back and forth. Look here from one of the walls at how in the middle you see Ra in, I believe this, I mean, to me it looks like his beetle form. So this would be Khepri. And then do you see how Apep, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at my screen like you can follow my finger. Look around how Ra is surrounded by light, but then Apophis, the snake, boxes the light in on all sides, surrounding Ra, wishing to prevent his radiance from spreading outward, illustrating, I think, that chaos is always seeking and searching for cracks and seams through which to get in. And I think the darkness would succeed as well and overcome, but for the fact that we are light bringers. We are like Ra, traversing the creation through the cosmos, carrying the eternal flame. So according to the earliest accounts found in the Egyptian coffin texts, Apophis existed and grew from the dark waters before the light of creation, which they call the Benben, dawned. And ever since, Apep has been out to extinguish the light and plunge us back into the night. And the Egyptian priesthood had various rituals that they used to assist them in preventing the forces of light from oblivion, symbolizing the overthrow of Apophis in this never-ending struggle of good and evil. But most beautifully integrated, I think, in this recreation of a carving, if you look at the 4 figures, these are the 4 canopic jars that when people died and their bodies were prepared for burial, their vitals and their organs were placed in these canopic jars. And the jars themselves can be associated with the 4 elements. And do you notice how the Egyptians drew Apep going around every single jar? It's this idea that Apophis is present in all of our members. He passes around us and through us, and we must pass through him on our journey forward. That in order for us to be reborn, we have to, I guess, the only way to heaven is through hell. And what's so cool is that I think the Egyptians had this connection between the spiraling coils, if you will, like a serpent of the stars. Doesn't that look like a snake? This is the Milky Way. And so they called the heavens a duat. Nowadays we associated it with their underworld, but originally the word also referred to the starry heavens. And so it's so interesting that the Egyptians linked what is above with what is below, that the way that we rise is through descent. And that the Earth's spiritual evolution, I told you we were going to come to the Earth. The Earth's spiritual evolution follows, in a way, our own, marked by its celestial journey through the galaxy, her place in the cosmos, influencing the extent and nature of the celestial energies that we receive from our governing stars. If you look here at the scientific depiction of our solar system, what you'll notice is the heliosphere. We are a solar family. I really view our solar system within the protective womb of the heliosphere, which is the sun. You see, the sun produces a torus. The heliosphere, like the Earth's magnetic field, the sun's heliosphere shields us and buffers us from the direct, impactful, harmful solar electromagnetic radiation to allow life to flourish. And you can see that illustrated here. And you can see how all of the planets, and then you have interstellar space, where things are not part of our solar system. And so the Earth is traversing these 7 rungs as well. And we play a part, forming the social memory complex in our next step of evolution, how it's going to be a team effort. So those are just some of the connections that I just marvel at and enjoy and wanted to share with you. And will ask you now, what has this taught us about healing? How has the raw material helped us become better at facing APEP?
Well, you've pepped me up. You've apepped me all up. Thank you, Tim. That was masterful. And what comes to my mind immediately is the Ankh, because that, at least from my reading, is the archetype of archetypes, where Ra in the, I think it's 92 and 94 sessions, Ra mentions that shape contains the idea that there is no manifestation of love without the losing of itself, dying and rising, death and resurrection, loss and renewal. But as you so well pointed out, descending in hell in order to arrive in heaven. So the Ankh is all these archetypes that you spoke about tonight seem to be fleshing out in narrative form, just sort of the underlying grand meta archetype of the Ankh.
What is the Ankh again, please?
Can you find a picture of that, Tim? The Ankh is the circle. It's kind of an oval.
One of the hawk-headed images that Tim depicted, one of the first ones, he had Ra holding the Ankh.
Yeah, I'll find a picture of it here.
I agree with um, Doug that it is that the evil has to be present for the good, always tied together. It seems a very common and true kind of that. Oh, that the cross he was holding. Okay, okay, thank you. Really beautiful slides. That was very fun to look at.
Well, we all need to make a field trip and go to the king's chamber and the queen's chamber and go through ceremonial death and rebirth and sing Kumbaya and then eat really good sesame bread in the old city.
I guess one thing that I was reflecting on during the presentation is uh, religion as metaphor, or how I know I look at religious stories or what is held up as this is what happened as kind of folklore. I'm just curious if the way that this religion was accepted and practiced, if did people say, "Oh, this is the absolute truth," or were they just following human nature and go, "Oh, well, it's a fun story that kind of depicts some of it," but I don't know. Human nature is human nature, even in Egypt in 1300 BC.
Well, I certainly can't speak for the Egyptians, but in terms of nowadays in a postmodern America, I think almost everyone, and certainly those of us on this call, probably derive meaning from the symbolism, from the archetypical, that grounds it, rather than viewing it dogmatically or literally. We find great purpose and truth in what it represents and what resonates in that symbolism. Something, that's what I've been growing into with this group is more of that psycho-spirituality where I understand that what I believe is becoming as I am becoming, that there's a reciprocal sharing that's occurring. I see Peter nodding his head. Peter, can you elucidate more on this principle?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question from Russell. What was the what was the populist religion or religions? And I think that every culture is the same. It's great. There's a gradation of people that are more tuned towards oneness, so there were those that are more tuned towards duality. And often a lot of the society, the structure of a society is a dualistic structure. It's hierarchical. It's broken into different segments and sectors. And so there's what we'd call an exoteric quality of religion. And exoteric means it's more black and white. It's the structure of how do you live your life? What's bad, what's good? It's about power, control to some degree, orderliness, rules, regulations. And it's also about faith, because for some people, faith, just believing, is something they need. And for some people, they don't have a concept of oneness. It's a void. It's a blackness to them in some ways. So they have to believe that they're going to rise again with their body and be in heaven forever. And the whole others look at it from a reincarnation point of view. I don't think we all fully understand how it unfolds. Okay, it's like unraveling an atom and how it really works. But I think it's knowledge is structured in the awareness of the individual. And I think for people here, we're able to see the oneness, the esoteric quality of all images and iconography in all religions.
Thank you, Peter. What's really beautiful about the law of one material is I wear it like a hairnet, which I know is ironic because I'm bald. But a hairnet kind of shapes around what you've got going on, whatever coif you're rocking. It's not a helmet that keeps things in. A hairnet allows your hair to breathe and it allows, things in it, but it keeps it together. It holds it together. And all of us carry so much around with us from whatever we were raised with, from whatever beliefs that we have acquired. In my hairnet, the law of one doesn't really make me pick and choose, but what it does is it harmonizes and helps translate Rudolf Steiner to Carl Jung, to my Mormon upbringing, to Eastern philosophy, with chakras and the cosmology that Doug is bringing in through process philosophy with Whitehead and Teilhard. It's just remarkable. And it allows all of these pieces to kind of coexist. And over time, I see that they all remain with their distinct identity, but something is coalescing together for me. So that I see congruences where things kind of line up now, where I hadn't noticed before. And it's like things, when the dust settles, it's like, oh, okay, this is working. So that's kind of where I'm at currently, where I don't take the law of one necessarily as the gospel truth, but it's a powerful tool to help reconcile all these disparate things that we carry and bring them into one. It's kind of like I wasn't really planning to go into the cult of Mithraism, but this is a Greek esoteric body just after that was really popular until Christianity sort of snuffed it out. And Saint Jerome talked about what they did in their ceremonies, and they had these 7 steps, and it's like the 7. Ra has 7 densities, and you just start noticing these commonalities that are everywhere. And in Saint Jerome's description, it talks about how in the lowest order, the people would take the snake staff. So it's kind of like you're starting from Apep, if you will, from that darkness, and then you incrementally evolve and progress further. The second stage is represented by a veil and Venus and the bridegroom. And then in the third stage, that if we compared this to densities, like we're in the third density, going into fourth, was Mars and the warrior, represented by the lance. Think about how we're choosing sides, about the bellicosity that here with developing polarity. But then in the fourth stage, it was represented by the lion and symbolized by the laurel crown. And think of the unity of kind of the density of love. And then in fifth was the scholar's cap, and think of the wisdom associated with fifth density. And sixth, I can't remember, but the seventh density is the shepherd father. And so it's kind of like brings it all into one. And so I just think, all of these traditions in the great perennial traditions, the wisdom traditions, share a lot in common. So people for thousands of years have been developing these myths, and they must speak to something that is really deeply ingrained in our makeup, in our nature. When C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were part of the Inkling Club, and they were both Christians of different stripes, and C.S. Lewis was writing like Mere Christianity during the war, and all of this expository writing. And Tolkien, was doing Lord of the Rings, and they had this great debate one night at their club meeting, kind of like, this. We're like the Inklings 2.0. And Tolkien said, you really should, you realize, Jack, that myth is far superior to convey truth than your essays. And it's true. Think about it. Who can quote what's in Philippians chapter 2? I don't know, but I can tell you about the hobbits because there is something in our makeup that is wired to remember story and narrative. We are creatures of myth. We devour it, we digest it, and we regurgitate it. Language, in some ways, takes us away from it when we get too much in the exposition. And so there is something very heart-centered about mythology that I really treasure. And if I get too much in my head, trying to understand it all, and spelling it all out, that's where I get lost.
I just want to share something really quick on that. That was beautifully stated, Tim. That what can a group like the Confederation do when they are responding to aid from the calling of third density, when the third density population, being as complex as we are on Earth, with such an intense veil, that the veil here develops the faculty of will and faith, but it wouldn't do us any good if we just, quote, knew the truth. It doesn't lead us to transformation or doing what we're supposed to do, say, in this density, but belief. So this is kind of going back to Russell's question about did they really believe? I would argue that the vast majority did, as the vast majority do now in whatever belief systems they have. And I would say that for all of its distortions where belief turns into rigid dogma and then othering other people, belief wholeheartedly, completely investing self and family and generations into a belief system is a way to deeply live out and touch these archetypal truths, which we would call the perennial philosophy. And I would argue most now that we are approaching the shift into fourth density, it is only now in the past 100 years with advent of good psychology and spiritual writers that we are able to excavate myth and see how it is both externally true and internally true, and that they all align, you see. And so I think you do have to really be invested in it. You have to fully believe. It's like taking AA. If you're doing AA, you have to do that first step or the other ones don't work. So you have to fully invest in it. Anyways, that's just a thought.
Well, I can tell you what test or rubric my wife uses with me because, I go all over the place. I want to learn about everything. I want to talk to everyone. I want to just be in the thick of it all. And I come back and, it's like walking through the perfume counter at Macy's, the smell lingering, the fragrance as I walk through the house with whatever I've picked up that day, philosophically or metaphysically. And my wife always returns and says, "Sweetheart, how has this made you more loving?" as I'm, smacking the kids around. I mean, not literally, but it's like, and so it's true that that's what grounds me. The greatest way that, for I guess the principle of discernment, which we're all here to learn, which it's love. And then once we acquire that open heart chakra, then the next step is within the love to choose wisely. And that's really a beautiful place to be with all the catalysts swirling about us. Is my heart open? And what is the wisest thing my heart is telling me now? And it doesn't matter what really's out there if it's not helping me on the ground to be a better father and a husband and fellowshipper, then I'm just doing this for egotistical, selfish service to self reasons, where I am doing it for self-aggrandizement. I am doing it for the honor and for the praise of men. I have to really look inwardly at my motivation and say, am I doing this for the love? Is this making me more loving, more serving?
I have that was very beautiful, and you're right. I think all that. But I have a question though. So, and I haven't done the reading in the law one. I have newbie at that. But so, did Ra say when Don was asking about the Egyptians, like, yeah, that was me. That's exactly me that they're talking about in these pictures and the Ra and the scarab beetle. I mean, having the same name is kind of, and he said he tried to help in the distortions of consciousness.
Austin, you want to take that? Or DeMarcus? Either one.
It might not be a fair question. I'm sorry.
No.
It's just an ignorant question.
Could you repeat the question? I would be glad to speak on it, but I only caught
I
a
was
little
just
bit of it.
saying that does Ra take credit for being Ra in the Egyptian times and the depictions?
Yeah, in a sense, Ra says that they are the same Ra that interacted with the Egyptians, but implies or explicitly states that their memory was heavily distorted, their interaction was heavily distorted, they were misinterpreted by the Egyptians, and so they withdrew because they were being beheld more as gods than fellow seekers. And so my understanding then is that as they withdrew, hundreds, thousands of years passed and they got folded into the pantheon along with all the other types of mythology. So there's probably a strand of the Ra that we understand within the Ra of Egyptian mythology. But there's also a lot of cultural distortion that got built up on top of it after they had departed and Egyptians, did what they would with Ra's image and name and memory.
Anything else before we close?
I wanted to thank you, Tim, for such a lovely presentation and all the research you did to pull all those understandings together. Kudos.
Very
Well, thank you. As you can tell, I really was more focused on APEP than Ra. And the reason is because I think that it was through the raw material that I started really thinking of what does integration mean? What is integral spirituality? What does it mean to unpack rather than repress my dark side and shadow? And so I am just hugging that snake right now. And I'm trying to find out what's really inside of me so that I can move with it and beyond it.
And why is it always the snake?
Hugging that snake, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that Christianity kind of adopted a lot, like the Tree of Life and the Garden of Eden, and the snake as the bad guy. Yeah, I mean,
the snake is global. I mean, the Asian cultures have the serpent deeply rooted in their mythology. It's a big part of Vedic astrology. The Rahu and Ketu is the head and tail of the serpent. So it's something that is just it's universal within the psyche of the primordial human being.
I was watching something last night where Moses, the Israelites are being bitten by snakes, kind of, and so he makes a bronze serpent and holds it up in front of him, and it's what heals them. So it's interesting, that correlation there too.
The medical symbol has the intertwining serpents as well. Made me think of that, but it is even there, which is the staff.
Part of the thing with the serpent in healing is that it takes a thorn to take a thorn out. And so the serpent has the ability to poison and it has the ability to purify.
I actually think that's a really interesting connection in your presentation, Tim, and your follow-up sort of conversation about wisdom, is what, and related to what Peter just said, is Ra specifically references the serpent as a symbol of wisdom that has both positive and negative uses, and thus can be the negative use then inducing the venom, but the positive use being the unraveling of the serpent to, meet at the indigo ray chakra. So, the mythology that you went through with the serpent and the Egyptian mythology, I think there's a way you can identify the dual aspect of the serpent within all that. I think it's really interesting.
Well, I will close then because Austin reminded me. So the Egyptian had headdress, and you've seen the headdress, and it has the snake head coming out of their crown, and it's called the uraeus. So that is our, let's see, this would be our sixth chakra, the shuttle to intelligent infinity.
Well, wonderful job. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, everybody. We need to close out, and we always do as a closing prayer. Would someone be closing for us? Would someone volunteer, please?
I can.
Okay, Troy.
So grateful that we have this group. So grateful that minds who seek you and come to differing and but yet complementary understandings can express themselves in freedom and harmony. So glad that we have chosen the service to others path and we serve each other. And so use all of this good energy in all of us to love better. Amen.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. I'll post the theme here shortly. Take care. God bless.
God bless.
Bye.
Thank you, Tim. Very nice.